Okay, so you were talking about being on continental Europe now. So what your mission was then to go into these towns, you were saying?
We're to go into a town, which the infantry usually had just taken, and take over the government and keep the citizens out of the hair of the fighting troops. So we were usually where there was a lot of shooting going on, but eventually we were put into a convoy to go to Angers, France, which was about to be taken by the Americans, which is quite a bit further south. The Americans by that time had broken through the German lines, and the Germans were fleeing fairly rapidly. At one point, when we were in that in that convoy, we all had to pull over to the side of the road because General de Gaulle and his French troops were coming over. So this was quite a bit of time after we had gone over, but Paris was eventually and soon going to be taken. And they wanted for political reasons, they wanted the French there, because it would sound good. But the French, as far as I know, did nothing to fight our way onto the territory of France. But that may be wrong. Again, I don't know. I'd have to read a history to see what the
Your impression now, huh?
That was all of our impression.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you were in theater when the Nazis surrendered?
When the Nazis surrendered, we were in Germany.
Okay.
Already.
So how long in total were you?
That's like a year later.
So you were in theater then for a year and a half, or how long?
Well, we, as I recall, we landed in June or July, and the Germans, and by the time another winter passed, and we were in Belgium by that time, and I had been transferred to a different military government detachment, and we were waiting. And during that winter, we were just inside Belgium. And during that winter was when the Battle of the Bulge was taking place. Mm-hmm. And soon after that, after the Battle of the Bulge was over, we went into Germany, into the Ruhr region, which had just been taken. And this was now in early 1945. Mm. I can remember the cold of that winter, which was very, very cold. And we were in the Ruhr in Bottrop, Germany, where we had taken over the government, and it was at that time that in the spring that the Germans surrendered. I think it was in May or something like that. And by that time we had been assigned a permanent occupation spot. And that was almost diagonally opposite. And in the Ruhr, we were in northwest Germany. Where we were going was in southeast Germany, way down by the Danube. And it was then that we started our trip together with our vehicles and the detachment that we were in to go down and take over this territory in Bavaria, which was fairly close to the Czech border, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And how long did you spend there then?
Well, it was at that point when we were, and it was going to be a long trip, a long drive, that I realized that we were going to go through Hadamar, which is where my mother's family lived, where we had gone, as my sister had gone there more often than I had, But as children, we had visited there many times, and I knew exactly where the house of my aunt, which is the Hertz side of the family, lived, and so at a stop somewhere, you know, when you're in a convoy like that, you just stop every couple of hours, and everybody, you know, pees at the side of the road and what have you. So that was. I asked the commander, the captain who was in charge of our detachment. I told him that I had close relatives living in Hadamar, and could I please go in and see if I could visit them. And he was a very nice man, and he said, "Yes, I'll give you an hour." So we will wait at the other side of town.
Wow.
And so the fellow who was riding with me in my Jeep and I went into Hadamar and stomped into the city hall, which, and of course, being American soldiers, everybody made way for us,
Right.
and demanded to see the Bürgermeister, which we did, and he was very nice. And I told him who I was and that I had relatives there, and he knew all my relatives. And they're there. You can go there. Everything is fine. So it was just at the other side of where the city hall was. There was a big square in front of that, and the other corner was where their house was. So we drove over to that house, and I took everything off that I could take. I took my guns off and my helmet and everything, and I went inside and was warmly received by my aunt, and I believe one of my cousins was also there. But my grandmother, who was there, refused to see me. She refused to talk to me. They had some bitter experience. They had experiences along the line where they were kicked out of homes several times because they were going to be occupied by the Americans. And
so this is your mother's mother?
This is my mother's mother, right. And I spent, you know, maybe half an hour there, and then we went and joined our convoy, and went on and to Grafenau in Germany, where I stayed until at least we saw all of the, you know, in that area is where all of these troops that had been in Russia and had survived were all marching back, and I stayed there. I'm trying to think. I stayed there until for at least 6 months. When my turn came to go home, and the turns to go home went by points. Every soldier got points. Points were based on how long he had been in Europe, whether or not he was in a combat zone, and I was in all 5 of the combat zones, and so I got the points, and I headed home, and I can't to this day recall how I got from, I was assigned someplace in southwestern Germany to wait, because we were basically on our way to Marseille to board ship to go home. And when we camped outside of the city, and I can later on come up with these names of all these, I knew that I had an aunt, my mother's brother's wife, was now the wife of the mayor of that town. So we made up camp, and we were assigned to a big tent to sleep and all that. And there were all these Germans running around on their bicycle, and I went out there and stopped one of the Germans on their bicycle and asked him to go to the Burgermeister's house and tell him that Burkhard sends his greetings and that he is here and on his way through to go back to the United States. So that was it. And I went back to my tent, and around evening, somebody came rushing into the tent and say, Schneider, Schneider, somebody's looking for you. And I said, who's looking for me? Well, some civilian girls. Well, we eventually found each other, and they were two of my cousins who were bound and determined that they were going to get me home. They were to their house. Yeah. So at that time, everybody was on their way home. There was very little discipline. Nobody really had to. I didn't have to ask. Well, I didn't ask permission, but I went with them. They had a car. I went, and they had a car and gasoline because they were in the Burgermeister's house. So I went over there, and I can remember the first thing I asked to do was to take a bath.
Yeah.
Because you become